Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really important and increasingly talked about area, the Climate, Community, and Biodiversity program.
Mhm.
You're likely tuning in because, you want to understand what makes projects in this space credible, impactful, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail there.
Right. So our mission today is really to unpack the CCB program, what it's all about, how it works on the ground, and, well, why it's such a key framework for these land management projects. The ones aiming for real wins for climate, local people, and biodiversity.
A triple benefit.
Exactly. We'll be drawing on some detailed resources you shared, the program rules, the actual standards projects need to meet, and a manual for assessment.
The SBIA manual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Absolutely. So I think the fundamental thing to grasp about the CCB program is it offers this structured way for projects to prove they're not just tackling climate change, like reducing emissions or planting trees,
Right.
but that they're doing it in a way that also benefits the local communities and the ecosystems there. It's this sort of integrated approach that's really significant looking at the whole picture.
Exactly. And this isn't just some abstract idea, right? It applies to a huge range of actual on-the-ground efforts.
Mhm.
We're talking projects cutting emissions from deforestation, the whole REDDD plus idea, but also things like reforestation, agroforestry, pulling carbon out of the air.
That's right. And the CCB program, it serves this really valuable dual purpose. First, it's a set of guidelines, a standard, for designing these projects properly from the start,
Okay.
making sure they're well thought out for the local situation. And second, and this is pretty key for getting things moving, getting that CCB validation early on can be a real boost.
How so?
Well, it helps track support, funding, it signals to investors, governments, others, that this project is serious about delivering benefits across climate, community, and biodiversity.
Right. That makes sense. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Our sources mentioned some important evolution, moving from version 2 to version 3.
Yeah. It was about incorporating feedback,
Mhm.
right? And crucially, making it easier for smaller, community-led projects to get involved. Exactly. That was a big shift. Trying to make carbon finance more accessible. Then version 3.1 was more about aligning things with the VCS program, the Verified Carbon Standard, and standardizing the reporting side.
Those revisions sound quite significant. The community access part in version 3, that seems like a big deal.
Oh, it was. It wasn't just tweaking. It really reflected this growing understanding that, climate solutions often work better and are more just when local communities are genuinely involved and empowered.
Addresses that criticism that maybe the benefits weren't always reaching the right people.
Precisely. People who are often the best stewards of the land anyway. And then the alignment with VCS in 3.1, that streamlining, helps projects going for both CCB validation and those tradable carbon credits from VCS, because that's an important distinction.
Okay, yeah. Let's clarify that. This might surprise some listeners. Just getting verified under CCB itself, it
Right.
doesn't generate tradable carbon credits directly, does it?
No, it doesn't. Think of it more like a quality seal. It attests to the project's design and its expected positive impacts across the board.
But the documents are clear. It's often used with other programs that do issue those units.
Exactly. The CCB program adds that crucial layer of confidence, that credibility about the overall quality, the climate, community, biodiversity bits. It makes a project much stronger when it then goes for carbon credits through a separate GHG crediting program.
Those are the ones issuing the credits we hear about.
Yeah, for verified emissions reductions or removals, CCB bolsters that case.
Got it. So the CCB standards themselves, these are the nuts and bolts, right? The criteria, the indicators projects have to meet.
Pretty much. They lay out exactly what projects need to demonstrate. And you mentioned shall in the documents. Yeah, that's the key word. It means mandatory, non-negotiable.
Okay.
The standards are the benchmark. Criteria are the big requirements. Indicators are the specifics that auditors check. That shall means you absolutely have to do it for CCB validation.
One thing that really jumped out is how much emphasis there is on projects clearly defining their objectives and the boundaries, physical and social. That seems foundational.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
You can't assess impact without knowing exactly what the project aims to do and where it's happening.
Right.
This means really understanding the local context, the ecology, the communities, their livelihoods, the existing biodiversity, everything the project might touch.
And here's a key concept for everyone listening. The benefits are always judged against a without project scenario. This idea of additionality, too. That the good stuff wouldn't have happened without the project.
Yeah, the without project scenario, or baseline, It's trying to picture what would likely have happened anyway if the project wasn't there.
Right.
Establishing a credible baseline is crucial. It's how you show additionality that the project's benefits are real, directly because of the project, not just business as usual.
Okay. Now let's talk about linking CCB with these other greenhouse gas programs. The sources say if a GHG program has similar climate requirements, a project might get a waiver for that part of the CCB assessment.
That's the idea. It's about efficiency, avoiding duplication for projects going for both CCB and GHG credits.
Makes sense.
But the key thing is, the GHG program has to be recognized as having equally tough standards for the climate part, like a solid methodology for calculating emissions reductions or removals.
But there's a condition, isn't there? If you are using a recognized GHG program for that climate waiver, you have to get verified for CCB at the same time as the GHG program verification.
Exactly. Simultaneous verification. It ensures that even if the climate bid is assessed elsewhere, the project still meets those crucial CCB community and biodiversity standards. It keeps that integrated approach intact.
And if a project doesn't quite meet the GHG program standards?
Then it has to use the CCB's own templates and meet the CCB climate section criteria directly. No waiver then.
Okay. So how do we actually know if a project is, walking the walk, delivering on these promises? That's validation and verification, right? Can you break down the difference?
Sure. Validation is mostly upfront. It's a review of the design of the project. Does the plan, on paper, meet the CCB rules and standards? This happens before things really kick off.
Right, the plan.
Verification comes later, periodically, once the project is running. It checks if the impacts, climate, community, biodiversity that were predicted are actually happening, or at least on track. It looks back over a specific period.
And these checks, they aren't done by the project developers themselves. They're independent bodies.
Absolutely crucial. They have to be independent, approved validation verification bodies, or VVBs. They need the right expertise and impartiality to assess the evidence objectively against the CCB standards.
And the sources highlight the kind of expertise needed on the audit team. It's not just environmental science, is it? There's emphasis on local knowledge, social understanding, even language skills.
Totally. A good audit needs a diverse team. Local language skills are vital for talking to communities properly. You need people who understand the specific land use practices in that region. Social and cultural expertise is key for assessing impacts on people. And of course, you need the ecological and biodiversity experts too.
And the project proponent, the ones running the show, they have a big job here. Sounds like they carry the burden of proof.
They absolutely do. It's up to them to provide all the documents, all the evidence, to show the VVV how they meet every single CCB standard. They need to be organized, transparent, answer questions, help arrange site visits and meetings.
Right. And the process involves digging through all that paperwork, but also site visits, so the auditors see it for themselves.
Right, it's both. A desk review of documents and physical site visits. Those visits are essential for verifying information, seeing activities in action, and talking directly with communities and other stakeholders.
Something really interesting is the public comment period. So anyone can raise concerns, and these have to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a key part of the transparency. It allows broader scrutiny. The VDBs must consider all public comments they receive and explain in their final report how the project proponent addressed them. It helps catch potential issues early.
Okay, so the audit wraps up, reports are finalized. What then? The notes say the proponent sends these to VCS, and the project status gets updated to validation approved.
That's the step. Submitting the final validation report and statement to VCS is a big milestone. VCS posts them publicly on the registry and updates the status. It signals the project design meets the CCB requirements.
And what if the project changes later on? Can those changes be validated too?
Yes, projects often need adjustments. There's a process to validate these project description deviations, usually during a later verification audit. Importantly, they check these changes against the original version of the standards the project was validated against, for consistency.
Okay, let's switch gears to something really vital: safeguarding communities and biodiversity. The sources really stress understanding who the stakeholders are, their rights, their interests.
Yeah, effective stakeholder engagement is absolutely core to the CCB's social and biodiversity safeguards. It really starts with mapping out who could be affected, positively or negatively. And you have to recognize all their relevant rights, Legal rights, customary rights, other genuine interests.
And it's not just identifying them. There's a need for effective consultation, using methods that work for different communities, paying attention to vulnerable groups.
Right. And meaningful consultation is much more than just telling people what's happening. It's active engagement, respecting culture, providing full information, giving real opportunities for feedback, and actually using that feedback in the project.
Making sure marginalized voices are heard, too.
Definitely. Special attention is needed there.
The documents also mention needing a feedback and grievance procedure, a clear way for people to raise concerns.
Essential for accountability and trust. It needs clear steps, timelines, and it should be accessible and fair. Maybe even use local or traditional ways of resolving disputes where appropriate. The aim is to fix problems effectively.
Then there's FPIC-free, prior and informed consent. Sounds like this goes beyond just consultation, especially for people with land or resource rights.
Oh, absolutely. FPIC is a cornerstone. It means that people holding rights to the lands and resources affected by the project have the right to say yes or no before the project starts based on full understanding.
And it's ongoing.
It's an ongoing process, not a one-off signature. And crucially, consultation, just talking, is not the same as getting consent. FPIC requires explicit agreement.
And projects should really try to avoid making people move involuntarily, right?
Very strong emphasis on that. Involuntary removal or relocation should be an absolute last resort. If it's unavoidable, it requires meeting very strict conditions, including obtaining FPIC from those affected rights holders. Displacement can be devastating.
Respecting customary rights to lands and resources is also highlighted.
Fundamental, especially where indigenous peoples and local communities have those deep, traditional ties. It means understanding and upholding their traditional governance and resource management practices.
Okay. Now let's dig into the Social and Biodiversity Impact Assessment, the SBIA. We have that whole manual. What's the core purpose of an SBIA?
So the SBIA is basically a structured process to analyze, monitor, and manage the social and biodiversity impacts of a project. It's a tool for developers to really understand potential effects, good and bad.
Right.
And then develop strategies to boost the good stuff and minimize or avoid the bad stuff. The manual gives detailed how-to guidance.
One key method mentioned is the theory of change, or causal model. How does that work here?
Yeah, the theory of change. Think of it like a roadmap. It lays out how the project's activities are supposed to lead to the desired outcomes and impacts.
Okay.
It maps the cause and effect chain. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, impacts. It clarifies the project's assumptions and identifies the pathways to success and potential risks.
And within that, these results chains help visualize specific pathways.
Exactly. Results chains visually map out the steps expected to lead to a particular positive result, like improved livelihoods or restored habitat. Helps see the critical links and potential hurdles.
It sounds like a big part of SBIA is also about spotting potential negative impacts early and figuring out how to mitigate them.
Proactive mitigation is crucial. The SBIA pushes proponents to think, what could go wrong here? And then, what specific actions can we take to avoid, minimize, or compensate for those negative effects? This is also tied back to maintaining FPIC.
The notes also mention using participatory methods in SBIA workshops, getting stakeholders involved directly.
Super valuable. It brings in local knowledge, community perspectives, makes the assessment more grounded in reality. Collaborative workshops help identify issues, build that theory of change together, and design monitoring that makes sense locally.
And for measuring impacts, the guidance talks about indicators and monitoring plans, with community involvement in defining those indicators.
Right. You need SMART indicators, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound to track progress. Involving the community in choosing what to measure is key. It ensures the indicators are meaningful to them and reflect what they value.
Lastly, for SBIA, the Basic Necessity Survey, BNS, is mentioned as a tool for measuring poverty changes.
Yeah, the BNS is a relatively quick way to get a snapshot of poverty levels based on what communities themselves say they need. It can provide useful data for the social impact side, especially if poverty reduction is an explicit project goal.
Okay, shifting to biodiversity specifically, the sources stress needing a really good understanding of the initial conditions as a baseline, describing vegetation, species, threats, high conservation values.
Absolutely critical baseline work. You need to know what's there before the project starts to measure any change. Documenting habitats, species, especially rare ones, the pressures they face, and identifying any HCV's areas of exceptional importance is fundamental.
And it needs to be quantitative, right? Not just descriptions, but measurements of vegetation, species abundance, things you can track.
Yeah, quantitative data gives you that rigor for monitoring over time, measuring things like tree density, forest cover changes, maybe counts of key animal species.
Yeah.
Metrics you can measure repeatedly to see trends.
Projects also need to consider off-site impacts and show the project benefits outweigh any negative spillover elsewhere.
Addresses that leakage issue. You don't want to protect one forest patch only to have the deforestation shift next door. Projects need to assess potential off-site impacts and demonstrate a net positive biodiversity outcome overall.
And finally, on biodiversity monitoring, there's this discussion about balancing expert versus local involvement. Sounds like trade-offs between data quality, cost, community ownership.
Finding that right balance is key. Experts bring technical rigor, maybe higher data quality initially. But involving local communities builds ownership, can be more cost-effective long-term, and harnesses their on-the-ground presence and knowledge. Often, a mix of both is best.
Our final topic from the sources: complaints and appeals. Seems there is a formal process if people have concerns about VCS decisions or how the CCB program itself is run.
Yes, crucial for accountability. There are established procedures for filing complaints about specific VCS decisions related to a CCB project, or about the program's overall operation.
And if you're not happy with the complaint outcome, there's an appeal process.
That's right. A mechanism for further review if the complainant isn't satisfied. Usually involves submitting details to the VCS board chair.
It's interesting that generally the person complaining pays the costs, unless the appeal overturns the decision.
Yeah, that cost mechanism aims to encourage genuine concerns but discourage, frivolous claims.
Yeah.
But reimbursing costs if the appeal wins ensures there's recourse against unfair decisions.
So wrapping this all up, it's clear the CCB program is pretty comprehensive. It's really focused on ensuring land projects deliver integrated benefits, climate, community, and biodiversity. We've seen the importance of clear standards, the rigorous validation and verification, the absolute necessity of community involvement in FPIC, and how SBIA helps guide projects towards those positive outcomes.
Absolutely. Hopefully this deep dive gives you a solid foundation for understanding what can seem complex, but it's such an important framework for responsible land management. It's a real effort towards integrity.
And for you listeners wanting to go deeper, the sources definitely point towards the VCS website and those detailed manuals as the next logical step.
Indeed. Lots more information available there for anyone interested.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. How can frameworks like CCB truly contribute to a more sustainable, more equitable future for people and planet? And maybe more pointedly, what role does this kind of transparent, rigorous assessment actually play in making that vision a reality? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.